Good afternoon, everybody. Hello, committee members and guests. Today is August 22nd, 2023. State Fair time, just about. And I will call the meeting to the Environment Committee to order. So a little after 4. We do have a great agenda before us, so without any objection, we will move forward with that agenda. First thing on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from August 8th, 2023. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
Move the minutes as presented.
Second.
And motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carries. Nothing on our consent agenda today. And that takes us to our non-consent business agenda. First thing there is a budget amendment. And so, welcome to Mr. Smith and Mr. Gsellmeier.
Is the mouse right there?
I think we're going with the clicker. I think the clicker has been retrieved, found, and is operational, hopefully. So we have 2023-174 JD 2023 budget amendment.
Okay, great.
It's working. Yeah.
Excellent. So, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Matt Gsellmeier, and I'm the Budget Manager in Environmental Services. You might see Ned's name, Ned Smith's name on the presentation. Ned was going to present to you today, but he's been under the weather and just felt it best not to come in. So I'm here today to present business item 2023-14JT, which is a joint item for the third quarter budget amendment. I'm here to discuss environmental services portion of this budget amendment. The broader budget amendment, which includes other divisions adjustments, will go to the management committee tomorrow. I would also like to state that there's a typo in the business item, and this will go to the council on September 13th, not August 23rd as listed on the BI. So our proposed action for today is that the Metropolitan Council authorizes the amendment of the 2023 unified budget to add $656,000 to the 2023 authorized capital program as indicated in attachment 3 and modify the 2023 operating budget as indicated in attachment A, table B1, to increase wastewater expenses by $7.31 million and increase wastewater revenues by $7.5 million. So the first adjustment we're proposing is to increase our capital program by $656,000 for environmental services share of the Business Process System Integration Project, or BPSI. This process pays for council-wide information system replacements and enhancements. This is a multi-million-dollar and multi-year project with mostly capital costs and some operating costs. Additional capital and operating costs will be integrated into the 2024 to 2030 Capital Improvement Plan, or CIP, presented in September, as well as future operating budgets. We're also proposing a $7.5 million increase to our 2023 revenue budget. $4.75 million is for recent state appropriations that hadn't passed when we adopted the budget in December and only came about in recent legislative statutes. Of the $4.75 million, $2.75 million will be pass-through in nature to the city of Newport for inflow and infiltration infrastructure improvements. The other $2 million will pay for a combination of ES staff and consultants as they develop a surface and groundwater plan for White Bear Lake. We'll have about 4 to 5 years to spend down that revenue. You'll see a little bit in on the expense side. Oh, I'm sorry. Skipped some of the revenue pieces. We're also proposing to add $2 million for a large industrial waste customer that recently corrected a monitoring issue. This additional revenue is planned for in 2024, but was still uncertain when we created the 2023 budget. So we've had, one of our large industrial waste customers, they're going to be transferring some of their work to other locations. We were still somewhat uncertain what that would do with our revenue when we planned our revenue for this year. So, now as we're understanding what that revenue looks like, we need to add $2 million. But in 2024, we won't need to do that anymore because we kind of have it under wraps now as we've uncovered the story of what's going to happen with that customer. And then finally, we're proposing to add $750,000 to our investment earnings due to rising interest rates. So this is a good item from our increasing interest rates. We earned some interest on our cash holdings, and when we created the budget last year, interest rates were significantly lower. So, as interest rates are increasing, we see more money come in on those investment earnings. And so we were very conservative when we budgeted that. So this is a good thing to see that additional revenue. It'll help with the expenses that I'm about to explain here in a minute. So and some of these revenues and expenses did come up a little bit last year as we're sort of kind of getting our teeth around what's the impact of inflation for things like our chemicals and utilities and changing in industrial waste customers. So here on the expense side, we're proposing an increase of $7.31 million to our 2023 budget. $7 million of this is for chemicals and utilities, which are largely driven by inflation. Our chemicals constitute roughly $4 million of that, which is primarily for nitrate salts, which is used for odor control, and also polymers. The remaining $3 million is split evenly between electric and natural gas. So we have seen this inflationary increase, but I'd say that we are planning for it, I feel, accurately for 2024. I know that was one of the questions I received last time we did a budget amendment, was like what's going to happen next year. So, as we are increasing our rates more for 2024, we feel like we have a good handle on capturing those expenses for 2024 as it sits in that current budget. We're also requesting to add $1 million to our materials and supplies budget. I anticipate materials and supplies is going to actually overrun budget by $3 or $4 million, but I expect some offset on payroll due to vacancies. So at this point in time, we don't feel like we need to ask for that entirety of that amount. The last expense increase we are proposing is an additional $150,000 for spending on the White Bear Lake Comprehensive Plan. So we have 4 to 5 years to spend the $4.75 million that we're planning in our revenue. And due to GASB rules, we need to recognize the revenue right now. We have time to, we are supposed to recognize the expense as we plan for it in the subsequent years. And right now, we have 4 to 5 years, $150,000. It's taking a little bit of time to get that. It's going to take some time to get that work ramped up. Newport, it's going to take them some time to figure out how to get all that work done. So, but we are expecting to see some this year, some of that work starting on the White Bear Lake Comprehensive Plan for $150,000. And then finally, we're proposing to reduce our interdivisional budget by $837,000. And this is primarily because those BPSI costs are moving to capital, but it's not a complete one-for-one, as there's a few other small moving pieces in that interdivisional budget. Some of them is just them figuring out which division gets which piece of this big capital project. So, but that's primarily the reason that we're going to see somewhat of a reduction in interdivisional. So with that said, I'm not Ned Smith, but I would be happy to stand for questions. And our proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council authorize these budget amendments.
Any questions for Mr. Gsellmeier? Councilmember Wolf, was it yesterday? At the Community Development Committee was commenting that in that committee, that was one of the largest quarterly budget adjustments that she's seen, that we've all seen. And this is a pretty big budget amendment as well, thanks to what's coming down from the legislature and other activities. Without any questions, there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion's been made and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carries. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And that takes us to our second item on our non-consent agenda, which is the 2023-185 Engineering Design Services for the Hastings Sewer Collection System modifications. This is contract 22P312. Welcome.
Hi, Mr. Chair and committee members, my name is Chad Davison. I work with Environmental Services in the Interceptor Engineering Group. I'm here to present business item 2023-185. It's engineering design services for Hastings Sewer Collection System modifications. contract 22P 312. All right. Facility plan was adopted by the council and approved at Minnesota Pollution Control Agency for the design and construction of a new wastewater treatment plant in the city of Hastings. New treatment plant property is approximately 2.5 miles southeast of the existing treatment plant. So substantial modifications need to be made to the Hastings collection system to get the untreated water out to the new plant site. Treated water discharge also needs a treated water discharge to the Mississippi River from the new plant. Service areas included in the request for proposals as for engineering, architecture, design services, geotechnical subsurface investigation, construction inspection, communications, private utility location, topographic survey. Design is for over $47 million worth of construction, and it's anticipated that it's going to be separated into 3 different bid packages constructed over 5 years. So a summary of our solicitation: we requested for proposals on January 26th, 2023. We had a disadvantaged business enterprise goal of 12%, and 6 proposals were received on March 8th, 2023. Those were from Bolton Mink, Howard R. Green, McKinley Horn, SEH, Stantec, and TKDA. Our review of the proposals, we had 2 different panels. We had a qualifications panel and a cost analysis negotiation panel. The qualifications panel had 3 staff members for environmental services and 1 external stakeholder from the city of Hastings. The cost analysis panel was all 4 environmental service staff. During that evaluation, we reviewed the quality of each proposal, qualifications of the proposer, experience of the proposer, and the cost of just the top selected firm. So our proposed action today is that the Metropolitan Council authorizes the regional administrator to execute contract 22P 312 with Kimley Horn Associates Incorporated to provide services for design and modifications to the Hastings sanitary sewer collection system in the amount not to exceed $8,713,334.43. And that is the conclusion of our presentation.
Fantastic.
Back to you, Chair.
Any questions for our presenters? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is just for the design phase. So is this a not to exceed? And are we not going to see them come back and ask for more money? How is it going to be working for us?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Davison.
this is a not to exceed. This is their full value. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Very good. Other questions? And is there a motion?
Move approval.
And a second?
Second.
Second has been made. Motion has been made. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed nay? Carry on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's talk diamond rings. This is very exciting. The moment I've been waiting for. I've been reading all about this, seeing all about this on the television stations, and you got a video for us too. Welcome to the committee, Ms.
Mr. Chair, committee
McKinley.
members.
Mr.
Thank you for
Peterson.
this opportunity to present. I'm Deb McKinley. I'm Manager of Programs Administration in our Admin and Communications Department in Environmental Services. So, at least the chair has heard about the diamond ring story. Have all of the rest of you heard it as well?
Been on the news.
All right, perfect. Well, so diamond rings are a symbol of integrity and commitment, yeah? And so really, Kai and I are here to talk today about the behind the scenes story for all of you, to give you the story about what happened behind all the news stories, and also to give you some measurement behind all the news stories as well. But the real story is about the commitment and integrity of our staff throughout the entire process of this whole journey with this ring story. The social media post here shows that this story, it was highly unlikely to happen. It was like finding a needle in a haystack. And I'll give you some high-level facts, and then Kai will go into the storytelling aspect of all of this. The ring was lost for 13 years. It had gone an entire 1,000 feet in its journey during that time period. Who knows what it was doing during that time. It took us 1 month to find the owner, and it was 2 months of media attention. And actually, we're still working on some of the trade press activity right now. But really, it's the story of over 650 dedicated ES employees and our regional administration partners. So again, I want to turn it over to Kai Peterson. He's an information specialist in the department with me.
Thank you. So in mid-March, John Tierney, who's here today, along with Todd Bennett, and Bruce Jensen, found a diamond ring while performing maintenance on a piece of equipment at the Rogers wastewater treatment plant. John then reached out to ES Communications for help finding the original owner of the ring. On March 24th, the media relations team orchestrated an interview with John Tierney and NPR to amplify the message. This prompted an initial approximate 50 calls to the general inquiries line. And then April came, and on April 5th, a media event was hosted at the Metropolitan plant for media convenience at a central location regarding the found ring. 6 news outlets attended the media event announcing the found ring, including CCX Media, Fox 9 News, KARE 11, KSTP TV, and WCCO TV. John Tierney did a great job highlighting key messages about what not to flush to the media, though coverage conveyed only a simplified version of his message. The public response to the media stories following the event was both quick and unrelenting as people rekindled hope of reuniting with lost wedding and anniversary rings. We received an approximate 350 email inquiries and an approximate 400 calls. The ES Communications team worked together to sift through this tremendous influx for the rightful owner of the ring. We had calls from as far as Eastern Canada, also some in the American Southwest. We had calls regarding rings lost decades ago, and from people as hopeful as having lost their ring in an airplane while making a brief connection at MSP and one that ended up in the Rogers plant. Every hopeful inquiry was met with compassion and thorough work from ES staff, regardless of how remote the possibility it was for their lost ring to match our found one. Another heartening observation of our massive influx of inquiries was that in screening these hundreds of calls and emails, there were none that seemed to be a fraudulent attempt to claim the ring. The general sentiment from the public at large was to get the ring back on the right finger. On April 16th, a Rogers resident reached out with a hopeful potential match. ES Communications staff took the ring to 2 separate jewelers to compare against photos of the lost ring sent from the Rogers resident and received affirming judgments from both jewelers. This resident's daughter had heard a news story and told her mom that it sounded like the same ring of the family story. We were lucky the ring was found in Rogers as well. The population served in Rogers is a fraction of that at a larger plant like Metropolitan. So when we were screening these, it was very easy to be like, did you lose it in Rogers? And if the answer was, I lost it in Las Vegas, we could be like, probably not. Or even if I lost it in St. Paul, probably not. But we were thorough. With the aid of the general counsel, Rogers resident Mary Strand was reunited with her ring after 13 years on May 8th. Mary's husband joined for this transaction, and we found out that he owns a plumbing company, and that when the ring was initially accidentally flushed, they snaked a camera down into the line to search for it and even removed the toilet entirely from the bathroom and shook it around looking for it, to no avail, of course, because it was in our system. And then on May 17th, a second and final media event took place at the Rogers plant to announce the reunion of the ring and its owner. 10 media outlets attended the final news conference, and the press event brought national and international media coverage of the story, highlighting the integrity of council's staff for a massive audience. With that, I will turn it back to Deb.
So here's the measurement portion that you probably haven't heard about. So all of those stories that Kai was mentioning, there were with our media news service, they documented 523 news clips, so that's print, radio, TV, and online coverage. The audience reach was about 1.5 billion impressions, and so that's all the different places. It's not people, it's impressions, so it could be you 3 times or whatnot. But the value of the media coverage was estimated at $24 million. So the council cannot afford this kind of positive press in any other way. So all of the work behind this was so incredible to get out the message of what the council does and all of the work that happens in environmental services and around the wastewater area. As I mentioned, the ongoing work that's happening right now as follow-on is work with our trade publications, because we want them to hear the behind-the-scenes story, some of our lessons learned about this, and also to highlight what a great place we are to work and some of the amazing people that we work with. So, this was a really fantastic story for Mary and her family. It had already become the thing of legend in their family about how Mary tends to lose rings and other things. But really, the story, as we all own it, it's about our ongoing excellence in operations and our wastewater treatment work. But that's a really hard story to pitch to the news media. You know, we're often the silent service. People only care when things go wrong. They take us for granted. So it's a really hard story to get into the news. But because things that make news are conflict, celebrity, and novelty, and this one won the novelty bucket. So a very unique fairy tale story. Got lots of attention, as you're all aware. And again, the real story is our employees' integrity and commitment. From the maintenance workers who did the discovery to the communication staff who fielded all of those calls, and some of the calls were fairly, you'd go, really? You called? But with all the compassion, which people heard stories that were actually kind of tearjerkers in many cases too. So the compassion that was showed. John Shadle in particular from Media Relations did a ton of work to set up the media events. Our operations staff for those 2 media events did a ton of work to prep those locations and sites. The work that Shelly Stupel did to get her staff to gussy up the plant, and at the Rogers location as well. And so really, this is a shout out and kudos and recognition for all of the work, the 24/7-hour shifts, and from our plant our water resource planning staff to our wastewater staff for all they do to keep our waters clean. So kudos to everyone. And I want to recognize some folks in the room who are also part of this. Christine Stevens, part of the communication staff. Tessa Werginke, they also fielded many of those phone calls and emails along with Kai. And John was already acknowledged already as well. So thank you so much. Any questions?
Any questions? Please.
Well, I just have a comment. This whole storytelling aspect of it, I think, was so well captured at each step to kind of continue to draw people in and to have the whole story and the ending. And you know, anybody who's lost something valuable like a ring understands the emotional, you know, really, it's really hard because I've lost other jewelry and it's like, oh. And so the fact that the staff, you know, has to field those calls and listen, so we're very grateful to that. And then it's just really a message for the whole Metropolitan Council about the power of storytelling in the communications. Continue to try and get out there, make it personal. You know, the staff here is amazing, and to continue to highlight that. So thank you for just, I mean, it was a job well done by everybody. It really was.
No question about it. And are we going to watch a video or?
I
maybe
understood
at
that
the time?
technically it's kind of a
Kind of tough.
problem to have to, it doesn't work really well. Was
We
what
can
I was
watch it on our
told.
own time.
Yes, the link is on the website with the other material, so for all of you, and all of who's watching remotely, it is available. And it's a really, this one in particular is a nice summary of the whole package.
Well, I would second your message about commitment and integrity for the ES team and the entire Met Council team. And to John and Todd and Bruce, well done. And to Christine and Tessa, well done. And to both of you, well done. And to everybody involved, great job. Council member, you're absolutely correct about the power of storytelling. We see that in ES, but we see it in Metro Transit as well. When those bus operators go above and beyond and help a autistic kid or some kid that's lost or do something just extraordinary. And we certainly have seen it in this example as well. So wonderful. Yeah, please go ahead.
One more comment is, I was thinking too about how easy it would have been to just ignore what you saw was a glimmer, you know, or how it was found as they, you know, oh, okay, well, there's something there, but I'm not going to take the time. I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to look. And that's where the commitment to say, well, that might be something. It might be something. So let's go do it, to take that extra step, which is, I think, what the Met Council staff does. And that's also just indicative of, it's so easy to just pass by, but you didn't. And so that was really, I think, key to how this thing unfolded.
Nice attempt to have the 10 o'clock news dedicated towards flushable wipes, by the way. But somehow they just wanted to focus on the diamond ring part of it. Gosh darn it. All right. Well, thanks again to everybody. Really appreciate it. Wonderful job. Mr. Colvin, top that.
Yes, top.
What story do you have for us?
Environmental Services System Plan Overview.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Kyle Colvin. I'm the manager of the Wastewater Planning and Communities Programs Group. And today I'll be going over a very high-level review of the Regional Wastewater System Plan. The system plan is part of the Water Resources Policy Plan. Today I'll be going over the purpose of the Water Resource Policy Plan and show how the system plan fits within it. I'll cover some of the statutory references that call out specifically the wastewater system plan, go over some of the system plan content and the purpose of that content, go over how the contents or information is developed from input from various sources, review the value of the wastewater system and the investment outlook going out 20 years and beyond for the system. Review some of the regulatory strategies that go into the system plan, then also go over the system plan and policy plan development timeline, which I believe you've seen before in previous presentations. This is a slide that you've seen before in previous presentations. It outlines the purpose of the policy plan. You'll note that in the second bullet, it specifically calls out the wastewater system plan as one means of providing for an integrated water planning approach. There's a couple of examples of that in the current policy plan. I suspect it will be carried over into the next 2050 system plan. That includes the verification that a community's plan has adequate water supply to accommodate future growth, and one of the requirements of the policy plan and the system plan is that before a community's wastewater plan is approved, they have to show that they have adequate water supply to accommodate for that growth as well. Also, the system plan will include policies as it relates to wastewater reuse opportunities. But then the last bullet relates to the commitments by the council to take action on long-range planning activities related to the regional system investments and facility management, both of which are outlined in the regional system plan. Minnesota Statute Chapter 473 includes two specific references to the Regional Wastewater System Plan. 473-852 identifies the Metropolitan Wastewater System Plan as being part of the overall Regional Development Guide, and that it reflects one of three individual metropolitan systems. It also indicates that the system plan includes related policies and capital projects related to future investments. And the second reference in 473 is 473-146. It outlines the system plan contents and requirements. It describes that the system plan will have a general overall description of the system. It will describe and outline the populations served by the regional system, both by location and level and timing for that service. And then again, it includes a capital investment plan that includes both a 20-year outlook and then a long-term post-20-year outlook in terms of capital investments. The system plan acknowledges a 20-year growth forecast and identifies major wastewater investments that will be required to accommodate that growth. It also identifies potential long-term improvements that will be necessary to accommodate growth beyond the 20-year planning horizon. Some examples of this that are in the existing plan, and I foresee it also being included in the future plan, is for the 20-year planning horizon. We've identified the future wastewater treatment plant in Crow River, up in Rogers, also the Hastings relocated treatment facility. Also, post-20-year planning horizon, we've identified future treatment plants in Scott County, Carver County, and also identifies in the current plan policies related to rural treatment plant acquisitions. It also provides potential alternative projects to accommodate growth or provide other services such as wastewater reuse. An example of this is in the current plan. Again, I foresee this being included in future plans. Is the Northeast Area Treatment Facility. That facility was identified as a means to taking flow out of the existing interceptor system and recapturing some of the necessary long-term capacity that's required. That treatment facility would also offer the possibility of offering reclaimed wastewater reuse if there are potential uses up in that general area. The system plan is a reflection of the most recent local comprehensive plans that indicate the level and timing of service to accommodate anticipated growth. So for the 2050 plan, what that means is that it reflects the service level requests that were represented in each community's 2040 approved wastewater plan. So it's a composite of those service level requests. The plan also reflects the vision on how services will be provided within the 20-year planning horizon and also the long-term or the post-20 20-year planning horizon, or in this case, what will be the new 2050 plan. And it's based on existing conditions or known conditions regarding regulatory requirements. And I'll get into that a little bit later. We don't try and project or forecast what those regulatory requirements are. We assume what we have today and then have policies in place to respond to those when they become a reality. The local comprehensive sewer plans are compared against the system plan, and at that time, a determination is made as to whether the proposed local plan is consistent with the council's system plan. If the proposed plan is found to be inconsistent with the system plan, the council can require that the community modify its plan. And those impacts or definitions of inconsistencies are again defined by statute. The council can determine that a proposed plan represents a system impact. That generally means some kind of physical risk to the facility, so building a stadium over an interceptor pipe or a building or a bridge for a specific plan or project could result in the council determining that it's a system impact. And also, if the plan represents a flow discharge in which the system cannot accommodate it due to capacity restrictions, we can also determine that that plan represents a system impact and require the city to modify their plan. The other example of an inconsistency determination would be if we determine that the plan represents a system departure. An example of this would be if a plan represents taking development off the books, it no longer is proposing to utilize system capacity or original investments in those capital expenditures, then the council could determine that as being a system departure. And that was the finding that led to the Lake Elmo negotiations and lawsuit eventually. It was because of a system departure, their plan reflecting a reduction or basically an elimination of service of this investments that were made for the city. The system plan also includes policies and objectives that will guide future efforts in the areas of wastewater reuse, energy conservation, climate adaptation, and also regulatory trends. The system plan contents, again, as I indicated earlier, it's a high-level system overview. It includes a description of the assets, both the collection and treatment. It provides for the sewer population, household and employment forecasts that are proposed to be served by the system. It gives a description of the regional wastewater treatment plants, which is reflected in a table that identifies each one of our 9 plants and the capacity, both existing and future needs of those plants. Also, it identifies the current regulatory treatment requirements of those facilities. It also includes the council's methodology of projecting regional wastewater flows, both by community and wastewater treatment plant. I'll talk about that a little bit later. It also includes a description and summary of the rural area wastewater treatment plants. And the reason why those local treatment plants are included in the system plan is that the council does have statutory authority for Total's regional wastewater planning activities. So by including this information of the rural area treatment plants in the plan, it's our way of confirming that the local communities who have own and operate their own treatment facilities have adequate capacity to provide for that service through the 20-year planning horizon, or have identified future projects so that they can meet those service level needs when they're required based on the forecast. Also included in the program is, as indicated, capital improvement programs that identifies major projects that primarily are based on system capacity needs, requirements that needs improvements will be included in the capital program, but only those regulations that are known again. And it also includes regulatory strategies in the event of regulations that have been identified as kind of being on the radar or on the horizon. You know, and those that would include the possible requirements for added treatment for nitrates and PFAS. And then also for the post-20-year planning, I also earlier stated that it identifies future wastewater treatment plants. It identifies interceptor projects where there are long-term known capacity restrictions. It'll include major interceptor projects and again, long-term regulatory strategies. Again, what the system plan isn't is a commitment to provide for services that are not consistent with our policies. A good example of this was in the last plan. There was a project that was proposed in northern Dakota County up in Inver Grove Heights. It was an industrial facility that wanted the council to investigate the possibility of providing reuse wastewater reclamation and reuse. At the time, we didn't have a policy that actually described that, the process, the evaluation, public outreach. So in 2018, the policy plan was amended to actually include the process for consideration for reuse. It also included the thresholds, the limit on regional investment that the council would be limited to for funding reuse opportunities, and also identify the level of treatment that would be necessary on our part to make that reclaimed water available to other users, and then the obligation of any added treatment beyond that would be borne by the industry. So the policy plan was amended to reflect reuse. And also the system plan does not list projects that haven't been proven to be technically sound or economically viable. This is a map that's included in the system plan. It reflects the long-term version of or vision of service and coverage in the metropolitan area. I kind of like to think of this as the visual system plan itself. It includes all of the systems that we have in the system. It identifies the 9 wastewater treatment facilities. Each treatment facility is associated with a color on the map. The dark shades of those colors represents what the communities have identified in their current service. So this particular map represents the service areas that fall within the dark areas on this map. Represents those areas within the communities that are in their 2040 service areas. The light shading are those areas that the council has determined would represent the maximum footprint, again, given current existing technology for treatment and regulatory requirements. Also assuming existing plant sites and the maximum that we could build the plant on that parcel. So it's an illustrative picture of what the council feels we could potentially serve ultimately, well beyond the 20-year planning horizon. It also, again, identifies the rural treatment facilities. Those are the communities that are identified yellow on this map. They own and operate their own treatment facility. Again, we rely on those services for those rural areas to provide for growth and service. And then also identified on this map are a few of the major projects that, again, I've mentioned earlier, the future treatment plants, Pearl River, Hastings, Scott County, Northeast area, wastewater treatment facility. And I've also added on here the Savage trunk sewer acquisition, which will be necessary to provide service to Credit River, which was a new service that was requested in the city's last comprehensive sewer plan submittal, which was approved by the council. Again, just to reiterate, the long-term wastewater service areas, it includes capacity of each treatment plant. Again, considering, that says future regulatory scenarios, I should say known regulatory scenarios. It includes the capacity of existing interceptors or identifies projects in which capacity enhancements are required. Again, through that map, it identifies those areas in the communities that are available for development on regional wastewater service. And then also it identifies wastewater generation rates that are based on specific locations, and I'll get into that a little bit later. Again, inputs for the development of the system plan. Again, the previous comprehensive plans plays a major role in the plan and how or where we plan to provide service. It does take into account the council's community designations and associated residential densities. It takes those into account by really using the forecasts. The forecasts that come out of community development uses those community designations and local land use guiding to really come up with a forecast, and then we use those forecasts, break them down to a little added granularity, because what comes out of community developments is community-wide forecast, and we have to determine what portion of that future growth will be provided service through the regional wastewater system. Also, it contains assumptions that there are no factors that could inhibit the growth projections as assigned by the council. And I've got water supply in parentheses. Again, the system plan and our approval of the local wastewater plan does require that their local plan identifies or states that they have adequate water supply to provide for the growth. So with that caveat, our assumption is that everything within those shaded areas that are on that system map can be provided service, regional wastewater service. And there's also internal driven objectives and strategies and partnerships that may require other investments. Some of those that have been recently talked about was thermal recovery as a possible area that could play a part and should be addressed in the next system plan. And also wastewater surveillance, there could be a part in providing additional sampling investments to facilitate and support those activities. Growth and flow projections. The system plan provides for growth projections in 10-year increments. They're broken down by, again, Seward, population, household, and employment. And those are presented on a community level basis and also on a wastewater treatment facility basis. Same thing applies to the flow projections. We break those down in 10-year increments. An average flow, and break them down by community and also treatment facility. We use a regional approach for developing flow projections. In the last plan, we assumed that new development would generate about 60 gallons per person per day. That's about 150 gallons per household, and 15 gallons per employee per day. The actual generation rates are somewhat less than that, but for planning purposes and for added conservatism, we use figures that are a little bit above what we have been seeing for new development. Also, the flow projections includes a gradual reduction of flow from the existing development. The last system plan, we've conducted some studies, and the average per capita day was about 85 gallons per capita per day. Based on the fact that over the last 10 years, we haven't really seen system-wide flow really go down any, and we've been seeing, I think I was told, about 0.75% growth per year. I suspect that 85 gallons per capita per day is probably a little bit less than that, but one of the tasks that will be assigned to would be to revise what that existing flow actually is. Some of that is offset, of course, by the lower new growth, but also I&I mitigation and water conservation plays a large part in that existing flow per capita. And then although it's not included in the system plan, we also do plan for and keep track of biosolids. Even though system flow has stayed relatively steady, our solids are continuing to increase at our plants, which is reasonable. You had people, industry, solids production is going to go up, but through water conservation and I&I mitigation, the hydraulic flow kind of stays the same. So the system plan does take into account loadings from growth and does identify capital investments, improvements to address that growth in solids. The long-term outlook for our investments is pretty much in line with what we've seen in the past 5-6 years, about 80% of investment in asset preservation, and about an equal split between system improvements, which is safety and regulatory projects, and then 10% in growth. So staying pretty consistent. The outlook is consistent with what we've seen the last number of years. Also, our estimated present value of the system is approximately a little over $7 billion. This figure was last estimated in 2018. Based on current inflation and such, that present worth is going to be larger than that. And also, these figures does assume some level of rehabilitation. So even though you see on there where it might say a gravity sewer has a useful life of 80 to 100 years, that assumes that there is some intermediate rehabilitation that occurs to that facility. Again, just to kind of emphasize the point, regulatory scenarios, the system plan does not incorporate regulatory upgrades in the capital improvement program until they become a reality, an actual requirement via a rule or permit or other enforceable regulatory vehicle. The strategy as it pertains to regulatory scenarios is that we continue to maintain and preserve our assets efficiently and effectively so that our revenues can support any response to upgrades when increased regulatory requirements are presented. We also stay current on technology improvements and how they might reduce the cost of potential upgrades to our regulatory requirements. We also actively engage in discussions with our regulators, PCA and EPA, in order to guide the regulatory outcome so that we can achieve a win-win situation. I think a good example of this is how we handled the phosphorus, whereby initially we were looking at individual multiple phosphorus limits at a few of our plants in the Mississippi River, but by combining those individual plants and having an umbrella permit, if you will, for phosphorus, that allows us to actually focus on some projects that we can get bigger bang for the buck, if you will. So that's one of the strategies that we are looking to continue with. And then just to wrap up, this is another slide I think you've seen before. The development of the system plan coincides with what you see there as a draft policy. We're in the point right now where we are starting to outline the system plan contents. We've just recently came up with a table of contents for the policy plan. We have people that are starting to draft some, both the policy and the system plan. A major input of the system plan, however, is the release of a final community 2050 growth forecast that come out of community development. Half of that policy plan is tables with numerical information, and a lot of that is based on the forecasts. So the lion's share of really the hard work, if you will, in the system plan is once we get the forecasts, there's a process of breaking those down, assigning them to each community, each treatment plant, applying the flow forecasts. So a large part of our progress on the system plan evaluation and development will be getting those forecasts from community development. And I was in a meeting just before this one, and it's my understanding that those forecasts will be coming out sometime this fall, which should be plenty of time in order to make that schedule. That was a quick rundown of the system plan. Didn't entertain any questions.
That was a great overview, and we've certainly had some good conversations earlier this summer about the water resources policy plan, and so this is very helpful. I know I've got a couple of questions, but questions from Margit first.
Go ahead.
Please go ahead.
So I find this incredibly fascinating. So, okay, just geek right over the forehead. But you answered my question on the 2050 growth plan, because I was wondering, how you plan for, if industrial goes to residential, agricultural goes to residential, in all the infill that's going on in Oakdale. So you're not hit with surprises of what people want to do and then not having the capacity. So I was just wondering if there's been instances where, there hasn't been the ability to grow because of capacity and things where you were surprised. Was something in the past, recent past, not grow, that really surprised you in the planning, like, oh, we missed that or something like that? I'm just curious,
Mr. Chair and Council Members Cedarburg and Council Members, we have the benefit on the regional wastewater system. Our planning horizon is not 20 years, it's 60, 70 years. So it does offer some flexibility when those unforeseen land use changes come up. It's very rarely where we're caught not having the capacity. There's usually, again, adequate reserve capacity in the system to accommodate it. There's also some flexibility to maybe change the service point and redirect service, which usually relies on the local community to get the flow to part of the system that has the capacity. So very rarely is there a situation that presents itself because of that long-term planning aspect of the system plan. Also, we do use a conservative approach in our estimation of future flows. I indicated that we use 60 gallons plus on top of the 60 gallons per capita and 15 for employment on top of the existing flows. When we design facilities, we'll also use what we call an aerial rate. So we'll use we'll use 800 gallons per acre. Generally, in some of the core areas, we'll use an assumption for future development that's more than 800 gallons per acre per day. 800 is what the regional total is. A number of years ago, I like to use an example. We did a study in western Bloomington that one would consider that to be a pretty urbanized or suburban type development, and that generation rate was under 600 gallons per acre, and that's probably more than quarter acre lots in that general area. Downtown Minneapolis, you might see 9,000 gallons per acre or more. So we do when we plan for future expansions or future facilities, we'll take a look at the forecasts. That gives us the 20-year look, but then we look at the aerial generation rates for those longer term 60, 70, 80 years in the future. So again, we've got our methods that we use doesn't catch us short on capacity. It's not to say that it can't happen. A new Vikings stadium in Mendota might cause us some problems, but generally speaking, we can cover things.
Thank you.
That's how rumors get started.
I know.
Yes, Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can add on to that. During the time that I've been here, we had some capacity issues near 394 and Highway 100, because when it originally developed, low intensity with movie theater and, you know, it was not a hop-in place when it was Highway 12, but when it became 394, there was some serious redevelopment there, and there was a timing issue of how fast it could grow while we were putting bigger pipes in to deal with some pinch points in that area.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, that's usually those types of projects show up on the radar, you know, far enough in advance for us to respond. Excessive I&I, however, is an issue that can cause problems too. It's worth mentioning.
I have a question about the stakeholder engagement process. If you look at the timeline, we're sort of at that beginning part of stakeholder engagement. We talked to Jen about stakeholder engagement, about the water resources plan, but there's certainly a lot of people that are interested about a lot of different parts of this. These big projects that we've got in the near future, or even projects in Scott County, or which I was aware of, but I wasn't aware of the one in northern Washington County. And the other things that you identified, water reuse, climate, energy, other things that a lot of people would have an opinion on and like to weigh in on. And I'm just curious about the stakeholder engagement for the plan as a whole.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, and Jan or Judy can back me up here, but I envision that the development and the public outreach and engagement with the policy plans will also coincide, be simultaneous with the public input and engagement for the system plan. That's what we did. That's what we did last time around. I suspect it'll be all inclusive.
Makes sense. And I'm just curious about the proposed plant in Scott County and then the one in Washington. Are we talking flipping the switch on those in like 2040-ish sometime?
Yeah.
That decade?
Yeah. Mr. Chair and committee members, the Scott County plan is a post-2050 plan.
Post-2050 plan. Oh,
right.
okay.
There's adequate land supplies based on the last analysis. There's adequate land supplies to accommodate the projected growth in Scott County in those areas of Shakopee and Savage and other communities to accommodate it. But Scott County has put in place land use guiding that actually preserves a large portion of Scott County, so that in the future, when additional land needs for development occur, those land areas can be developed in more urbanized densities. So, for instance, they put land use guiding. It's either a diversified rural, a 4/40, or agricultural in use. So it's a way to preserve for those future areas, and the treatment facility that we've identified would be out into the future, well past 2050. We did a few years ago put in an offer on a piece of property, but we did rescind that. There was another bid that was submitted, and we chose to withdraw the bid and look elsewhere. And we're in the process right now of looking at potential sites there in Louisville Township along the river.
Great. Same with the northern Washington County. We haven't. Have we identified a site? I know we haven't bought anything yet. I don't think we have, at least. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, Mr. Chair, committee members, you're correct. We haven't identified a specific site. The northeast treatment facility was a was a project that was identified to alleviate or free up capacity in part of the collection system where we know we have some long-term capacity needs, restrictions. And so the thought is that, and it was determined that it would actually be cheaper to build a treatment facility to offload flow in the upper part of the system, treat it. Up in that particular area, we're looking at something similar to East Bethel, which would sort of be like a groundwater rapid infiltration basin for effluent disposal. But that would free up to 3 MGD of capacity in the pipe. That was cheaper than rebuilding 6 miles of interceptor down a heavily developed corridor between basically Hugo through Maplewood almost to St. Paul. So that was the original premise of the Northeast treatment plant, was it was cheaper to offload and treat. And of course, a facility to treat at standards that's required for rapid infiltration, it's just a little bit more of a treatment process to get it to a quality that could be for reuse. So even though the current plan alludes to the facilities being a reclaim, its primary objective was for capacity recovery, and even a reuse facility up there would still require the secondary means of getting disposing of the effluent, because if a facility is built specifically for reclaim and then the business goes away, we still need to have that capacity recovered in the system. So a facility up there would probably be a dual facility with either a primary rapid infiltration disposal with a secondary reuse, or possibly short term it could be a primary reuse, but the backup would have to be a rapid infiltration. All things that would be decided when something actually comes in and we request the service, which is one of the reasons why we don't include specific projects until there's a project that actually identified.
Makes sense. Other questions, comments? Keep us posted.
Yep. It's no ring story.
No ring story. Well done. Well, the Vikings are building a new stadium. I mean, that was news. The cameras will be at your house later today. All right. Reports from the general manager.
I don't have a report tonight, but I'm kind of inspired by the diamond ring story that maybe we all need t-shirts that say don't flush wipes or diamond rings.
No,
We can keep that social media stuff going.
I would wear that t-shirt. Every time I hear that diamond ring story, I just find myself sort of grabbing my hand just to make sure it's still there. Oh yeah, it's still there. Okay, good.
My fingers are too fat for my.
Really? Excellent. All right, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.